Hello, everyone. Welcome to TPS training. My name is Lewis Weber with Behavior Care. In this segment, we're going to take a little bit of a deeper look at D1. I've covered this in some of the other trainings because D1 is a go-to um, analysis, particularly when we're talking to parents about their child's data. And it's the second page of the D1 report. So when we go to print it, page 2 is the go-to. And look at that as one of the best ways to communicate students' performance. But there's more to the story. Let's take a look at that more, and that's right above it on page 1. And it's kind of a visually arresting number of numbers. Sounds a little awkward, doesn't it? It's a bunch of numbers here, which which can take a little bit of time to go through. They're all important, as everything is in TPS. There's nothing here just because it tells us something and it has some value. So let's go through this, okay? The first thing that you note up top here is you can enter the start and stop date. And this is helpful when you want to analyze portions of your TPS data. For example, before and after a medication change. So if there was a medication change sometime later in August, for example, you could put the stop date of whatever date that was, and it would display the data just for that time period. And that's a handy thing to be able to do. Now, you don't have to keep that stop date current. You can just put the last day of the school year, which is what the default is, because TPS doesn't analyze blanks. It doesn't. It always knows how many data points are being used in the analysis, so it excludes any of the blanks that may have come up when you didn't have data recorded, either in the past or for the remainder of the school year. So I usually just leave this for the beginning and the end date. Start and stop date of the school year, but sometimes I want to know performance before change. So let's say if August 30th was a school day, I would leave this for the first day, put August 30th, and then maybe September 1st, whatever was, or second was the next school day. I would put that here, and then I would leave that or re-enter that as the end of the school year. So it would show me the data during those two time segments. Okay, well, right now we're looking at all of Pete's data. We can see that we have 70 days of data and 4,289 records, which is sometimes surprising, particularly in IEP meetings when I say, well, we've been collecting data for a while. We have 70 days and 4,289 records. It offers a very powerful statement of validity that this isn't based on just a few observations. And that's one of the nice things about GPS is that you can quickly collect a lot of data across the school year. So let's see what's going on here. We have some tables, increasing and decreasing. Everything that I'm going to say for increasing is going to apply to the decreasing targets. So it's just duplicated. On the left here, we see well, in this case, there are 4 increasing target behaviors that are being monitored in Pete's data. And we're using a 0 to 4 rating system. I know that from the top here, but I also know it because I have that listed as a rating. If it was a 0 to 3, that heading would go away, or if it was 0 to 1, these headings would go away. We wouldn't see any data over here. So that's how I know, well, in multiple ways, that there are ratings. The ratings go through 0 to 4. What this is showing is the quantity of each of the ratings for each target behavior. So 22 ratings of 0 have been earned for respect. In other words, during 22 recording blocks, the recorded value was a 0. During 58 recording blocks, the value was a 1. During 217 recording blocks, the value recorded was a 2, and so forth. And we see this little hump right here in terms of numbers. So 2s and 3s are the predominant. Sometimes Pete earned a 4 for respect, and sometimes he earned a 0. And this is duplicated for each row. Now, as we go to the right here, this is the average rating um, without with the zeros. So what this does is it says, okay, I have 37 fours, 184 threes, 217 twos, 58 ones. What's the average rating given that series of data? So it would be like averaging uh, a very long list where you'd put 37 4, 4 plus 4 plus 4, 37 times, and then 3 plus 3 plus 3, 194 times. And so it averages all that out as a 2.31 on the 4-point rating scale. Now, if we include the zeros, if we take out the zeros, that was with zeros, that was all of that. If we, including this column here, hope I said it right. If we do it without the zeros, then we're just going to be looking at these data. Okay, so with zeros, the average is 2.31. Without the zeros, takes out those 22 zeros, it bumps it up to 2.42. So we can say when Pete is showing some level of respect, the average is 2.42. It's pretty consistent throughout across his behaviors. Now, we can then look to see, well, how many data points were recorded when Pete actually did something. And that shows here in this column. So 506 recording values were not zero, or said more positively, the total of this, and this, these four categories is 506. And this tells us the incidents per day without the zero. So it takes these ratings and says, I'm going to divide that by the number of days in which data were collected. It's not 70 days because there may not have been data for each target behavior for the full 70 days. It actually goes in to its data set and says, well, how many data points, how many days did respect get measured? And so it divides it by that number. And so the average is 7.2 academic blocks per day um, occurred, and that is without the zero. So what that means is that the incidence of respect occurred on a daily basis during 7.2 times per day. Now, these percentages here are composed of these numbers here. So what this now does is it says 37, and I'm hopping over here, 37 is 7% of all of the ratings, and 194 is 36% of all of the ratings. And these numbers, or these percentages, are displayed in the graph on the bottom. So when we look at Pete's numbers, 7% of all the ratings were a 4, and that comes from this percentage right here. So we want to see more higher percentages over here on the 3s and 4s for all the increasing target behaviors. A couple of other boxes to take a look at. Here is a total of the incidences when a non-zero value was recorded. Sometimes that is a useful number. Here is the incidence per day. That's probably not the most important number here for increasing targets, but we'll cover it again for decreasing targets. And we can also look at the numbers as columns, total incidence across target behaviors. So across these target behaviors, Pete earned 99 zeros, 259 ones, 914 twos, etc. And that's going to talk about the percent of incidents across target behaviors. So 43% of all of the ratings of 2 across target behaviors. Well, let me try that again. 914 represents 43% of all of the recorded target behaviors across the different target behaviors that are measured. So 43% were 2s across all of the measures. And here's total incidents per day for each of these kinds of ratings as still another way to look at that. Some of these are more important for the decreasing target, which I'm going to look at right now. So let's see what we have here. When we look at ratings of 4, which is very much not wanted for verbal aggression and physical aggression and so forth, across target behaviors, 23 times a recording block was recorded with a 4 for a decreasing target behavior. And 43 times across all target behaviors, there was a recording of a 3 and so forth. Now, of course, most of them were zeros, and that was 92% of all of the target behaviors across all recording blocks, because this is, again, showing a total of all data for the school year. 92% of all the recording blocks showed a 0 for those 4 different decreasing target behaviors. Now, and then we can look at the total incidents per day. So across target behaviors, zero point 0.6, not quite 1 episode per day, had some measure of a 3. And it's pretty low because Pete's behavior is not that frequent, verbal aggression being the most significant. Now, when we see this kind of separation here, it tends to motivate us to look at that row rather than looking across this way. So you have to decide what the story is from looking at the data. And where's the interesting breaks in the data? That's what's going to drive your analysis. So here, verbal aggression is really the most interesting because we have more numbers here to talk about. And so the average rating with zeros is 0.44, which is very low because of all of these zeros that have been collected. So that's an average of 23 fours and 32 threes and 11 twos and 30 ones and 452 zeros. That average is 0.44. Now, when we look at the average without those zeros, which are just these values here, the ratings of 1 through 4, we see the average rating is 2.5. Now, how many recording blocks had some amount of verbal aggression? Well, 96 of them. So over the span of time that we did data recording, which is to say 70 days of data, 96 recording blocks, because we can have verbal aggression was available to be recorded during 8 of the possible recording blocks. 96 of them had verbal aggression, and the incidence per day was 1.4. So one on a daily basis, on average, at least one of the recording blocks was going to have some level of verbal aggression because that's what incidence shows. So 1.4 recording blocks a day. Of course, you can't really have a half a recording block, but it is just a numeric outcome. So 1 and a little bit more incidences per day on the average. Pete had verbal aggression, and those numbers again here, these numbers are expressed as percentages. So 4.2% of all of the ratings were a 4 for verbal aggression. And it turns out for physical aggression to people and property and out of the assigned area, there were never any 4s. So that's listed as a 0 here and a 0% here. We look at this number, we can say there were 156 academic blocks or recording blocks when some kind of verbal aggression, physical aggression to a person, physical aggression to property, or out of the assigned area was observed. It gives us just a sense of the totality of or the intensity of Pete's occurrence, really is the word that I'm looking for, the sense of occurrence of Pete's decreasing target behaviors. And across all of Pete's decreasing target behaviors, there's an incidence of 2 recording blocks per day. So that means, on the average, 2 recording blocks is going to, a total of that would be occurring with all of these 4 target behaviors. Now that average is not the most useful average because it's a total of averages here. More useful is what the incidence per day is for each individual target behavior. That's here just for completeness. It's really these numbers that we want to see here. Okay, well, there you have it. That's the D1 report. A lot of numbers, a lot of words to describe it. And for simplicity, we tend to use this page 2, these graphs, which are, again, percentage of incidence of decreasing target behaviors, percentage of incidence for increasing target behaviors. As with all of the TPS graphs and analyses, they're here if you need it. You're not going to go over every one of these boxes in every one of your reports for every one of your students' BIPs. You want to take a look and say, is there something interesting that these data are showing? Or not, and then you could talk about it. You say, well, it's pretty much the same performance across all of these target behaviors, or whatever the case may be. But the information is there, and it's there simply by graphing the data. And that's one of the best parts about TPS is it makes these data available to you if the data are going to communicate something of importance. Okay, well, thanks again for participating in TPS training. My name is Lewis Weber with Behavior Care.